G'day, I'm Paul. Toyota has updated the HiLux for the 2023 model year, so I thought, you know what, we haven't driven one of these for a while, so let's jump behind the wheel. This is the best-selling car in Australia of all cars, which I think surprises a lot of people. This and the Ford Ranger, they sort of tussle for first place constantly. This is the SR5, and this also has the Plus Pack, so it is the top of the tree before you get to the Rogue, and they've recently updated the Rogue as well. We're going to have a drive of that pretty soon. This is priced at just under $62,000 before you add the Plus Pack. That's an additional $2,500. I'll run you through what that includes a little later on. If that's too expensive, the entire HiLux range starts off at just over $24,000, and it competes with things like the Ford Ranger, the Nissan Navara, the Isuzu D-Max. It's like 12 or 13 competitors in this segment. Today we're going to do a detailed review of this car, so if you do want to skip ahead to other parts of the review, you can use the time codes on the screen, or if you're on YouTube, you can scroll down and use the chapters below. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon, because that'll tell you every single time we review an updated ute. Let's chat about design. So you've got 6 external colours to pick from. All but white is going to set you back an additional $675. What about the design? Well, look, this has been out now for ages. I remember going to the initial reveal of this and thinking, it's not a bad looking ute. And I think today, despite it being out for such a long time, it actually still looks pretty good. So they've updated the design a little bit. We've got a set of full LED headlamps here with LED daytime running lights and an LED indicator. These edgy 3D sticky out bits on the headlights as well. Big black grille over here. You've got chrome highlights along the top and the bottom there as well. Camera down here, because this update now adds a 360-degree camera. I'll have a look at that one a little bit later on. Around the side here, you have a set of 18-inch alloy wheels. It runs on these highway terrain tyres. They're sort of nothing too special, and they're not going to be great for off-road driving. So if you do want to do any sort of decent degree of off-road driving, you probably want to go down the path of a set of all-terrains. But the design looks nice. You've got a machine finish on the outside, piano black on the inside there, and no sort of wheel arch cladding. But these wheel arches are a little bit sort of pumped here on the front and the rear as well. That updated Rogue model that I mentioned actually sits on a wider track. They've adjusted the rear suspension as well, so I'll be interested to see how that drives. HiLux badge up here, and then the engine designation there, 2.8 litre diesel. Up the top here, you have chrome, a little bit more chrome, LED indicator, and then a camera here for the 360 camera. Just like the Ford Ranger, I reckon these side steps look a little bit cheap. They're just sort of this nasty looking plastic. I wish they'd just give them a little bit more design instead of just looking like that. Chrome door handles, you get privacy glass over here. Sports bar, because, you know, sports, and then whip around to the back. So around the back here, you have a set of part LED tail lights. So that section there is LED. Then you have incandescent in the center there. Now this is interesting. So kind of like on an aircraft where you've got no step zones, they've got little icon there telling you not to step on that, because I suspect you'll rip that right off. That is just plastic, and that feels like steel beneath there. HiLux badge here, SR5, because it is the top spec before you get to the Rogue. More chrome here. You have a camera built into this little section here. It's not centered either, so I'll be interested to see when we put the reverse camera on whether it looks a little skewed as well, because it is more beneficial when this is centered for hooking a trailer up. Big Toyota logo there as well, and then you have this section here which you can actually step on to jump inside the tray. Look, I've got to say, since the Ford Ranger launched, a lot of this stuff is starting to look a whole lot more basic, because Ford has integrated a side step there. In addition to that, on Ford's upper models, you get disc brakes on the rear. This is still using drums there. You also have a brake light integrated here into the tray. Let's have a look at the actual tray though. So in here, it's all pretty straightforward. You don't have a spray-in bed liner, so you're gonna have to get your own bed liner installed if you need that. There's also no torsion bar on this, so it is pretty heavy to lift. You get a payload of 1,000 kilos, and in addition to that, you've got these hooks on the side. And what about your tray dimensions? So the tray comes in at just under 1,600 mil long and a little over 1,600 mil wide, with 1,109 millimeters between the wheel arches. And finally, you have a depth of 481 millimeters here. So it is a pretty usable tray, but definitely not the biggest in the segment. And I don't know how useful this sports bar is for tying things down. I think it's more just a design element. So close that one up. Towing capacity as well of 3.5 tonnes. Now, let me know what you reckon about the HiLux. Is it starting to date? Do you reckon Toyota needs to start working on a new version of this and getting it out there, given how much competition there is in this segment? Let me know what you reckon in the comment section below. So we are inside the HiLux. We will kick off with the key. So you have lock, unlock, panic, Toyota logo down the bottom there, a little bit of chrome, and then HiLux on the back. It's a proximity sensing key, so you can leave that in your pocket, and then you have a push button start just over here. I tell you what, this feels so dated compared to some of the new utes in this segment, and it feels a generation old because it was built sort of when it was trendy to have utes that were very rough and just ready for a work site and ready for all this hard work. And I mean, you just have a look at some of these surfaces. Literally all of the surfaces here are scratchy plastics, except here on the side and on the door as well. So I think this theme is well and truly outdated now, especially with the price they're asking for some of these dual cab utes. You're talking $65,000 with the options this has fitted to it. This kind of just feels a little low rent for that kind of money. But what about your touch points? So it's soft in the center there, and it's soft on the door as well. How soft are they? Well, we've got our durometer. We've tested the main surfaces in this cabin. If you want to see how this car compares to others that we've tested before, have a look at the link in the description below. Now, what about build quality? It's fairly wonky in the center there. It's not too bad up the top there. And our door test still sounds nice and solid. So let's talk infotainment. 8-inch infotainment screen. It's a color touchscreen with shortcut buttons on either side. You've got inbuilt satellite navigation in there as well. All works kind of okay. In addition to that, Toyota's starting to roll out this feature across all of their cars, and it's connected services. So you're actually able to connect into the car through a phone application. Allows you to check the status of the car and all that sort of fun stuff, and you can see the status of that up the top there as well. On the radio front, you have AM, FM, DAB, digital radio. I did notice though, out here at the proving ground, the digital radio doesn't have enough reception, which is kind of weird because pretty much every other car we test here has more than enough reception this far out of Melbourne. We're only like an hour out of Melbourne. So yeah, I think it's a little disappointing the signal quality isn't as good in this. And that's all plumbed through a 6-speaker stereo. Nothing special there either. It's kind of okay. In terms of your phone mirroring, it is both wired for Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. No wireless here, unfortunately. This is what Apple CarPlay looks like. So it takes up that full screen. Works okay, tiny bit laggy as you flick through the menus, but it is fine. This is what Android Auto looks like. So again, full screen integration. Tiny bit laggy there as well, but kind of works okay. You do also have a tiny little screen there ahead of the driver as well that gives you information such as your trip computer and other sort of basic details like that as well. Now, safety technology, you get autonomous emergency braking with pedestrian and cyclist detection. Now has blind spot monitoring, which is good, and rear cross traffic alert. You have radar cruise control. You have kind of like a lane keeping assistant that uses the brakes, because this is still a hydraulically assisted steering rack, so it doesn't have that sort of e-pass setup. We'll test that later on when we go for a drive and see how effective that is in terms of the way that it works. On the parking front, you have both front and rear parking sensors and a 360 camera. I'll show you what that looks like. So these are the views that you get. That is probably the worst camera I've ever seen on a new car. That is, I mean, I can't even tell what that is, but that's looking out the front, I think. You can see there it is so grainy and impossible to see. That's the 360 view, also almost entirely redundant. That is looking down on the curb. Again, there's no real detail there. And then when you put it into reverse, sorry about the beeping noise, that is what it looks like looking out the back. You can just make out what it says on the suitcase. And you can see there as well, that camera being slightly off center means all the lines don't really match up with where the car is actually sitting. Let's chat about practicality, and we'll start off with your connectivity. So you have two 12-volt outlets down the bottom here, a single USB port. So if you are doing phone mirroring, can't really hook up any other devices at the same time. There's no wireless phone charging. You do have a power outlet here, which is great though. So that's a 220 volt power outlet, 100 watts. So not exactly a huge amount of power, but it's there anyway, just in case you need it. In terms of storing your phone, where's it going to sit? Well, you can slot it down the front there where they should have had a wireless phone charger, or you can pop it in the cup holders or in this sort of center section if you want. Coffee cup, let's have a look. So, yeah, it fits into there, but there's no teeth, so it kind of moves around a little bit. But you do get these cup holders in front of the air vents, which I think is great. You can slot your coffee cup into there if you need to. In terms of your bottles, fits down there without any dramas, but again, because you don't have any teeth, it kind of moves around everywhere. Fits inside the door too. We'll see if our big bottle fits. So it doesn't fit there, but it does fit into the door, which is good news. On other storage, you have this center console here, nice and deep, sort of fairly decently sized. Glove box over here that's reasonably sized as well. And then you have a top glove box there, which is air conditioned, which is great. And finally, a sunglasses holder up here. Now let's talk about your comfort. So you have dual zone automatic climate control. You have heated seats for the front row. The driver's seat is electrically adjustable, so it'll go forwards, backwards. Backrest will go forwards, backwards. You can lift the front of it. You can lift the back of it as well. Keep in mind that's part of that optional $2,500 package. Otherwise, it's all manual, just like the passenger seat. In terms of the seats themselves, they have this sort of leatherette material on them. Comfortable enough, nothing sort of too special. Steering wheel offers both tilt and reach adjustment, and then on our reach test, all of this stuff is easy to reach while you're driving. Now, before I hop in, let me show you how this works. It's interesting because it's a 60-40 up-folding seat. So you pull this little lever, lifts this section, and then you can lift that section as well. That gives you a little bit of storage under floor, which is quite handy. Pop that back down, I'll hop on in. We've got a big grab handle just there as well. So once we're inside, this is pretty cramped in here, so knees are right into that seat there. Toe room is virtually non-existent and headroom is okay, but not amazing. You have creature comforts like map pockets. You've got these hooks here for your shopping. Air vents, there's no USB connectivity at all, which means there's one USB slot in the entire car, which is bizarre. Center armrest here with two cup holders. No teeth, so that rolls around a fair bit. You can also pop this inside the door if you want as well. Just on carrying kids, you've got two ISOFIX points on the outboard seats and then two top tether points as well. Headrests are also adjustable too. Now, what about our window test? Oh, yeah. Boom, goes all the way down. One thing I forgot to mention as well. So Toyota replaced the steering wheel lock with what they call the ID box, and it's designed to be safer and better than a steering wheel lock. But as we discovered in our car theft video, it is actually very easy to override this ID box. So you can watch that video by clicking up here and have a look at how we're able to program a new key for a Kluger without even having the original car key. So I've just hit the road in the HiLux. Now, this is all going to seem very familiar because in terms of drivetrain, this really hasn't changed at all. So uses a 2.8 litre turbocharged 4-cylinder diesel engine, makes 150 kilowatts of power and 500 Newton meters of torque, and it's all mated to a 6-speed automatic transmission. What does all that mean behind the wheel? I actually really like this engine. It has a stack of punch. The pre-update HiLux, prior to it getting 500 Newton meters, really didn't feel like too much of a go-getter. This, on the other hand, feels confident when it comes to overtaking, and when you need to get out of there in a hurry, it really sort of gets up and moves without any dramas at all. So really impressed with the engine and gearbox package as well. The gearbox is quite responsive when it needs to be. I did notice on the way here this morning, sort of hunting between the gears at low speed. It would sometimes just click back and click up. I have a feeling a lot of this is to do with the fact that this car is literally brand new. We picked it up with 20 kilometers on the clock, so it is still very much being run in. And that's going to translate to the fuel economy as well, because the official fuel economy is just under 8 litres per 100 Ks. We're currently sitting on 10.4 litres per 100 Ks. So we're a little over that figure, but given the car is brand new, it still needs a bit more time to be run in. Now let's talk about the ride. The last update Toyota did to this, they actually made a few minor changes to the suspension. Look, HiLux has always been one of those utes that really needs a load in the back before it feels settled, and you can tell when you're driving in and around the city that it is quite sort of brittle, and you do notice a whole bunch of movement at the rear end as you're sort of traveling along. And that is unfortunately one of the side effects of leaf spring suspension. You're going to notice that a fair bit. So not really a great deal you can do about it if you don't carry much weight in the tray. It is just something you're going to have to cope with and deal with. As the speed picks up, it is a little bit better, but ultimately it is let down by suspension that I don't know, is firm at times, too soft at other times, and just isn't really all that well resolved. Righto, let's pick up our speed to 130 for our sine waves. Mentioned this before in our other reviews. It's just a really good indication of what body control is like in one of these vehicles, and it's something you'll encounter on country roads and also when overtaking as well if you're going to hit 130. So here we go here. Wow, holy crap. That is really not very good. Probably the worst we've ever driven over those sine waves. It just has no body control at the top end, and once it gets that oscillation, it's like a pogo stick. It just wants to leave the ground. So yeah, despite the ride being like weirdly firm at low speeds, it really just doesn't have the body control it needs at higher speeds. Now, drive modes, you don't really have any. You've got eco and power. If you stick it in eco mode, all of your throttle inputs become very dull and it doesn't really sort of do a whole lot. Strangely though, you also have an eco light down the bottom here that comes on even when it's not in eco mode. But pop this into power mode. Pop the gear stick over here into S mode as well. See how this feels with the drive around our track. Stuck in that. Look, we do this in all vehicles, including dual cab youth, to see how they perform when the speed picks up. Obviously, this isn't a sports vehicle, not expecting it to be amazing, but it's just a good indication of what the dynamic tune is like. The gearbox is actually doing a good job of holding the gears here and just giving me the torque that I need. When I roll into the throttle, it's quite responsive, and that 500 Newton meters is really sort of punchy when this thing is unladen. This doesn't have the ability to be driven in four-wheel drive, high range on sealed surfaces like you can in the new Ranger. So you are stuck just in two-wheel drive mode. If you do switch to 4-high, you need to be on unsealed surfaces, otherwise you might damage the driveline. Back straight, let's roll onto this, let's see what it feels like. Still actually has a fair bit of pickup there once it's sort of moving as well. It's not entirely disappointing, so there you go. The engine is pretty noisy once it's up in that rev band too. So yeah, look, this obviously isn't a sports car and it has a fair bit of body roll, but once you really do get stuck into it, everything happens slowly in the sense that it's quite predictable and it's a no surprise place to be driving. So yeah, look, it's not going to set any land speed records, but it is not too bad once the speed picks up. Okay, time for 0 to 100. Let's see how this goes. I'm going to pop that into power mode. I'll slide that over as well. I'll turn off traction control too, and we'll see how we go. So I'm going to go to 120 GPS speed because I want to see what this is like for our 80 to 120 overtake as well. So here we go. Run out of road here before we actually hit 120. All right, there we go. That took a long time to get to 120, so pull that up. So 0 to 100 took 10.8 seconds, and 80 to 120 took 7.5 seconds. So yeah, it seems that when it gets closer to that 100k an hour mark, the rest of it happens quite slowly. So might give this one more shot, loading up a little bit more throttle, but yeah, 10.8 seconds, 0 to 100. Okay, so leaning on the throttle a little more there, we got it down to 10.5 for 0 to 100, but still fairly leisurely, I reckon. Okay, time for our reverse test. Let's see how it goes. So I've left it in power mode, obviously. So in reverse, flatten the throttle. There you go, 32 kilometers an hour. By the way, just discovered something. If you switch stability control off and then put it in reverse, it will actually go faster. So watch this. Spins the wheels in reverse as well. So 46 k's an hour in reverse with stability control switched off. It looks like it's an electronic limiter when stability control is still on. So it's time to test our lane support system. I'll get this up to 70 k's an hour. And then once we're there, we will see how it performs. So typically what we would do here is test lane centering systems. This doesn't have any of that technology. It only has a lane departure system that uses the brakes. So I'll only test this in one lane. Normally we would do 3 outer lanes, but we'll see how it goes. So, wow, you can see it there. So basically it grabs that brake to push this back into the lane. And if I go over here and do the same thing, there it goes again. So it's a pretty unsophisticated system. And to be honest, when you're driving and you accidentally veer onto the lane, or even deliberately to go around something, you have to really, battle it to take over. So ultimately they just need to upgrade this to an electrically assisted steering rack, because that will actually help them finely tune those maneuvers. And you've seen with stuff like the Ford Ranger, it's able to hold and do its own steering in all 3 of these lanes, including the outer banked lane. So this is a fairly old system in comparison. Now, what's your road noise like? There's actually not a great deal of tyre noise, but there is a fair bit of wind noise that comes in around the car. But you will notice it if the wind picks up and you're driving on a highway as well. Now, in terms of towing capacity, 3.5 tonnes and a turning circle of just under 12 metres as well. Now, let's talk visibility. So, being a dual cab ute, you can see quite clearly down the front of the car there. The wing mirrors are decent enough sized. They have a blind spot monitor built into them. Visibility out the back isn't too bad. If you do have the centre headrest up a little bit, it can be a little impeded, but it's fine for the most part. Did notice as well at low speeds, this hydraulic steering is so heavy. And if you do have multiple movements, it can load up a little bit and become even heavier. I think they really need to be shifting this to an EPAS system, an electrically assisted one, to really make it easier to steer at low speeds. Okay, time to do some light off-roading. I'll run you through the specs here first. So ground clearance of a little over 200 millimeters. In terms of the actual mechanical setup here, so you drive it in 2-wheel drive high range on sealed surfaces, but you can switch over to 4-wheel drive high range on unsealed and also 4-wheel drive low range. There's a rear diff lock that only works in low range. You also have hill descent control. In terms of your approach and departure angle, you have a 29-degree approach angle. That's the angle of the face you can approach before you hit anything at the front of the car, and a 27-degree departure angle, which is the same, but in reverse. And finally, a weighting depth of 700 millimeters. So we'll kick off first by going over our offset mogul in 2-wheel drive high range with traction control on. I want to see how well the traction control system works and how well it gets us over the mogul here when we have a wheel off the ground. So it's going to be the driver's side wheel that is first to disappear in terms of traction. So there it is there, slightly lifted. I'll roll onto the throttle. I can feel it shunting a little bit there. Okay, I'm just staying in the throttle now. Go a little harder on the throttle. Yeah, we're not getting anywhere at all. I'll try moving the steering wheel a little. It's just sitting there. It's just pulsing away on that rear side, but it's not doing anything. So I'm going to turn off stability control. We'll try now again, a little bit more throttle. There we go, just with a bit more wheel slip, it's actually getting over. Come on, there we go. Perfect, okay. So, yeah, all it needed was just a little bit more wheel slip there to get over. So, yeah, traction control was being just a little too strict there, which is often the case. We'll come off our concrete mogul there. Perfect. All right, so next up, we'll pop this into 4-wheel drive high range. We'll try going over it again. When we go over in the other direction, we get 2 wheels off the ground here, so it'll be just a good indication of how, again, it handles itself with traction control on. So we'll try that first. So 4-wheel drive high range, you flick that over, you can see it engaging up the top there. I'll also turn traction control back on. There we go, that is engaged. So we're sending 50% of torque to the front axle, 50% to the rear, and we'll see how it goes now. Okay, so it's about this point here where we're going to get the traction control system having to do its thing. We get a wheel off the ground just there. Let's lean into the throttle. It's still been quite restrictive. I'll give it more throttle. Okay, I'm flat to the board now. getting anywhere, so I'll turn traction control off again. Give that another crack. All it's doing now is spinning the front left and the rear. We're not going to be getting anywhere, so I'm going to have to back off this and put it into low range so that I can lock the rear diff. That's what I really don't love about the system here with the HiLux, that you can't lock the rear diff unless it's in low range, which is a bit of a pain in the ass. So there we go. So rear diff is now locked. We're in low range. We'll give this one more crack. This should be enough to get it over because it was just it's not quite getting there with it just in four-wheel drive high range. So give this a shot. We'll get it back up to where it was, which is just there. I'll lean into the throttle. Now with the rear diff locked. Yeah, that's much better. A whole lot more effortless. It's able to just get traction on the rear end there and move along without any dramas. So let's head over to our hill and we'll see how it performs with an ascent. Okay, so it is time for our hill. We were here most recently with the Everest and it really struggled getting up here. So I've just popped this, I've just left it in low range with rear diff locked. Stability control is off. We'll see how it goes climbing up here. Most of the utes haven't had too many dramas up here, so should be okay, I think. Yeah, no problems at all. So I'll be doing the climb once more, except the difference the second time around will be I'll come to a full stop and then I'll get onto the throttle to see how it goes up there. But time to go through our mud bog. There it is. Okay, now hill descent control. So you push this button here, that activates it. And then we'll see how it goes once we come over this little crest here. Alrighty. Can't actually see over the front. Let me see if this has... Oh, it's got this full drive camera like the Ranger does. It's like impossible to actually see because it's such poor quality. So, see how we go. Chuck it over the edge. Okay. Hill descent control didn't do anything. It's just flashing at me. So maybe that only works in four-wheel drive high range. So, all right, we'll do the hill again in low range with my stop test, and then I'll just try hill descent control in high range. Okay, so take two on our hill. This time I'm going to come to a stop, and we will see how well it works here. Okay, so there's our stop just there. I'm going to roll onto the throttle now. We'll see how it goes. Oh, no dramas at all. God, this is so much better than the Everest was. The Everest just struggled immediately, so that's pretty impressive. So we're at the top. I'm going to put this into neutral and put it into four-wheel drive high range because I think that's how we get hill descent control to work. So yeah, there it is. The light's gone solid now. So we'll give this another crack. Let's see if we can actually get that to work. All right, here we go. Okay, so hill descent control. Let's see how well this works. I'm out of the throttle. Yeah, that's not too bad. And also not too noisy. It was actually really noisy in HiLux previously. Traction control sort of biting with hill descent. So not too bad there. Pretty impressed with that. Okay, let's have a crack over our rocks. So I've left this in low range. I'll basically just ride the brake with the throttle and we'll see how we go. So yeah, look, on paper, this doesn't have as much ground clearance as some of the utes, but I don't know how they measure some of this stuff. Some of them just measure it at random places, because as we're going over this, I can't hear any knocks or anything like that, which indicates to me that this actually probably has pretty decent ground clearance. And it's actually surprisingly comfortable over this. So I think the trade-off there for the on-road body control is actually really quite good here. It feels nice and smooth and it's not throwing me about too much. So actually pretty impressed with this over the rocks. Okay, time to do our river crossing. So this has a wading depth of 700 mil and it has been bucketing down, despite how nice the weather looks at the moment in Melbourne recently. So our little crossing there is pretty much at 700 mils. So we'll be right at the limit here. So I've left it in low range here as well. Okay, let's see how we go. Oh yeah, that's looking nice and deep. So here goes nothing. All right, drop that in. Oh my God, it sounds like it's floating through here. Excellent, that is coming through nicely. And good throttle feel as well through there. even though it is quite soft on the bottom. So that's great. We'll see what it's like on our climb here with these tyres. Tell you what, these tyres have really surprised me. For a highway-oriented tyre, actually has a stack of traction there. So yeah, pretty damn impressed with that. Look, I think ultimately the HiLux's biggest downfall here off-road is the traction control, but given you can switch that off, it does everything else really nicely. It is a bit annoying having to go through all of these modes to get to low range. You have to stop and then go to the next one. And also the fact that you can't use the rear diff lock unless you're in low range as well. I think that's a bit silly. But outside of that, I think that if you did want to go do some proper off-roading and you put some meaty tyres on this would be fairly capable off-road as well. So yeah. So the Toyota HiLux, look, I could stand here and tell you it's the worst ute in the world and people would still buy them because a HiLux buyer will always be a HiLux buyer, no matter what else is happening in and around the segment. But if you're one of those people that is actually cross-shopping this with other utes in the segment, a lot of them have now moved on and this now feels very old in comparison to things like the new Ford Ranger, the Isuzu D-Max as well. It doesn't have that refinement and certainly doesn't have the technology that we're seeing on some of the new utes on the market. So if technology and all that stuff isn't really too much of a concern to you, the engine is really nice and punchy. It's great off-road if you switch all that other stuff off and you're happy with just using manual controls. And being a Toyota, it's probably going to be pretty dependable as well. It is a little expensive when you look at what else is in the segment, especially V6 Ranger, now that's available around that same price. So look, that is worth keeping in mind. Let me know in the comments section below. I'm really curious to get a better understanding of this. Are you a HiLux buyer through and through? With everything else that's on the market, will you still buy a HiLux? And if so, why are you doing it? I'm really curious to understand that. Let me know in the comments section below. If you did enjoy this video, please make sure you like it and you share it with your mates. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon. Let us know which other utes you want us to review. But until next time, take it easy.